Good evening. My name is Winke Dubbeldam, and I'm the chair of the Department of Architecture at the University of Pennsylvania Stuart Weitzman School of Design, a mouthful. Thank you for joining us tonight for the Jeffrey Fine and Andrea Katz lecture, the opening lecture of our spring lecture series. And I'm super happy that this will be, the person who's with us is Jeanne Gang tonight. To start, I first would like to thank Jeffrey Fine and Andrea Katz, who created the fund providing financial support for the annual public lecture presented by distinguished practitioners in architecture. Mr. Fine graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with a Bachelor of Arts in Design and Environment in 1976 and a Master's of Architecture also at Penn in 1978. He is the founding partner at Pierre Fine Associates, an architectural firm which, since its inception in 1983, has been involved in a wide range of projects, including residences, corporate offices, retail stores, multi-family apartments, as well as academic and government buildings. This is the inaugural lecture of this sponsorship series. So we're super excited that this is a new thing for us. And I look forward to meeting some of you at the reception immediately after. So back to our guest. Jeanne Gang is the founding principal and partner of Studio Gang, an international architecture and urban design practice headquartered in Chicago. Jeanne earned a BS in architecture from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, an MArch from Harvard, and was a Rotary Ambassadorial Scholar at the ETH in Zurich. Before founding Studio Gang in 1997, Jeanne led design for Booth Hanson Architects' Moraine Valley Community College project and a private home in Telluride, Colorado. Also very interesting, and we share a little bit of Dutch history here. She served as a project architect for OMA, Rem Koolhaas, on the Congress Expo in Lille, and led the design of Maison Bordeaux, so the house we all know with a big elevator. Which I have a funny story, but I won't do that now. Jeanne is also a MacArthur Fellow and a professor in practice at the Harvard Graduate School of Design, and has been honored with the Cooper National Design Award in Architecture. He was also named one of the most influential people in the world by Time magazine. Known for an inquisitive, forward-looking approach to design that unfolds new technical and material possibilities and expands the active role of designers in society, she strikes places that connect people with each other, their communities, and the environment. Now, this attitude of inquisitive, forward-looking approaches was really clear when I met Jeanne for the first time in 2004, when we were both invited for an exhibit called Masonry Variations in the National Building Museum in Washington, D.C. This title is not a very sexy title, I totally agree, but the architects that were designed, I think we were the four of us, we all got a room in the museum, our own gallery, and had to install either something, I think it was aerated concrete, brick, terrazzo, and Jeanne did something with stone. And that something was a marble curtain, a feat of invention and engineering. And I quote, "Through structural investigations with engineers, including Joseph Burns and Faz Ehsan of Thornton Tomasetti and Peter Happel, we found that by linking the pieces of stone together in a series of jigsaw-like chains, the marble curtain could hang without any skeletal support or frame. Waterjet cutting allowed for intricate puzzle-shaped cuts. For structural redundancy, each piece was then laminated with a fiber resin backing." I was planning, Jeanne, to show an image, but sadly I failed miserably. So I really, you all go on Jeanne's website and find it. It's absolutely stunning. I have to say she had the best installation among us. Back to her office. Her studio's diverse award-winning work includes major projects throughout the Americas and Europe, ranging from community-centered cultural institutions like Writers' Theater to public projects that connect citizens with ecologies, such as the Nature Boardwalk, at the Lincoln Park Zoo, and high-rise towers that foster community, including the Aqua Tower, very famous one. Ongoing projects include the expansion to the American Museum of National History in New York, a new United States Embassy in Brasilia, wow, what an amazing spot, the University of Chicago's European Hub for Study and Research in Paris, a unified campus for the California College of Arts in San Francisco, and the new O'Hare Global Terminal in Chicago. Intertwined with build work, Jeanne and the studio also develop research, publications, and exhibitions that push design's ability to create public awareness and give rise to change, a practice that she calls actionable idealism. She also gave, and this is always when they say you're an important person in the world, she gave a TED Talk, Buildings That Blend Nature and the City, in 2017. And she just published a new monograph of her studio's work, Studio Gang Architecture, was published by FAIA last year. The short discussion afterwards will be, of course, with Jeanne, and we have respondents tonight who are Masoud Akbazadeh, who's an assistant professor of architecture and director of the Polyhedral Structures Lab, Homa Fajari, professor of practice and principal of Fajadi Architects, Marian Weiss, Graham professor of practice and co-founder of Weitzman Freddy, and two students, Maria Fuentes and Rachel Kulish, both MArch students. Please join me in welcoming Jeanne Gang.
Thank you, Winga. So kind of you, a nice introduction. I am really happy to be here and give this lecture. When I started preparing the lecture tonight, I was going to speak about something else, but it turned out that I got very interested in the explaining the research that I've been doing at the GSD about reuse and kind of framing the projects within that category for tonight. So I'll just get started and share my screen. And just for you, I grabbed a slide shot of the marble curtain just to kick it off. But this was one of the 4 installations that Vinka was talking about. So the practice, we really have a very collaborative practice, which has been interesting challenges given the last year of being apart. But it has given us a lot of chance to speak about, do you guys still see my screen or did it drop off?
I see your screen, but you didn't go full screen, so you have to go full screen.
Okay, let me go full screen again.
Now you're good.
So we've been, challenged in this last year and really been trying to find ways to collaborate in as close a way as possible, probably like everyone else. But our offices, one of the things that's happened is our offices, which are now spread out over like all these different cities, we've really been able to mix up our teams that are located in these different cities, and it's been very fluid. So although we really want to get back together, it's interesting to be able to have such close connections virtually. As Vinka said, this is the new monograph that kind of summarizes these families of projects. A lot of times I've heard in the past that our projects are greatly varied and there isn't, they're unique to each particular client. But in this case, we really spent time to show and articulate the relationships between the different projects in this book. And so you will see, I think someone who is very attentive to the work can see the relationships in that book. So this story really starts with my home city of Chicago, and it's always struck me how this city has, looks like it has been totally planned. and with these amazing green spaces and a physical plan. But if you think about how fast it transformed, only less than 100 years ago, it looked more like this, really defined completely by transportation lines and industry. And so I think when I look back, one of the most important books that I've ever read about cities in general, it happened to be about my city, was Nature's Metropolis by William Cronin, because in this book, he really talks about the environmental perspective on the history of the 19th century America, and this story of the city and country that become more and more entwined and bound together in a system that reshapes the entire American landscape and the culture that we pretty much know today. So I highly recommend it. And it's really one of the best books I've read on the city. So, but the human dimension to this background of the work is really that when I first started out as an architect, the projects I happened to start with a number of projects that were all community centers in these various neighborhoods in Chicago. So these commissions that were rather small, but I really got to know a lot of the people in these different neighborhoods. This is one in Chicago's Chinatown. The second one here is in the neighborhood of Auburn Gresham, which is on the south side of Chicago. And it's a also community center for foster kids. And it's really where I learned my tactics, I guess, which is having a very small budget, which many young architects do, and trying to make use of things that were left over or donated. In this case, we had a piece of leftover land, that green triangle. The red building is, the red rectangle is the building. But we also were told, like we need to gather donated materials and services even to create the building. And so working like that and trying to use those constraints as like inspiration, we created a community center with the leftover concrete that was literally donated from some of the big high rises going on downtown Chicago, which were different mixes. And so this idea emerged to create a building that was expressing the donations, highlighting the differences of the different mixes of concrete, and showing at the same time their fluid form, because the concrete, of course, is a fluid material. And so these inspired this, what we call the strata wall, which was the front of the building. So one more community center that around the same time was on the far south side of Chicago, which is an environmental center focused on conservation of environment and also green job training. And this area, like this project, ended up being a very influential project for our following work that came afterwards. But it really was based on the place and the qualities of the place. So if you see in this diagram here, the red triangle in the lower, I don't know if I can point, lower left-hand part of the slide is the site. And you see this kind of like patchwork of industrial areas and ecological areas, and then overlaid with this migratory flight path. And so all of these components that are both ecological, but also material opportunities came together to create a project that was really focused on reuse. And so in our teams, we did an inventory of all the materials that were available, and came up with not just a form, but really a strategy, a process by which we could build a building made out of reused materials that were available and nearby. So the metaphor for this for us was a nest, not a nest like to look like a nest, but a nest in terms of using what is available, what is nearby, and using the least amount of energy possible to create a community center, another community center. So this first model of a diagram showing this uses of these different materials that were available in the area, and at the same time a discovery, which really is why I love architecture so much, is in the research mode, finding out that this migratory bird path is coming right through Chicago. Like 2 times a year, you have this incredible international migration of birds that are, it's an event that's visible to everyone. And you can see this happening, but there's a big danger to it as well. Something like 1 billion birds every year die crashing into window glass, clear window glass that they cannot see. And so this is like something that's very, it's really decimating bird population and biodiversity. And it was something that we discovered as we were working on this project through our research phase. We ended up working with an ornithologist to help us design a way to prevent that, especially, you know, didn't want to kill birds that people are coming to see on this ecological project. So one of the things I did as research was tag along with these bird rescue teams that go through Chicago, and they literally pick up hundreds of thousands of birds and during migration. Some of them are alive and they save them, but other ones don't make it. So to try to understand what the actual problem actually was. And so that, together with working with experts, we came up with a screen that is made of recycled kind of rebar and steel material to be the facade of on this porch so people can be outside. So anyway, it was very important project for us, although it never did get built. But one of the tactics that we utilized, and I'm still working on today, is utilizing steel that has been rejected for, you know, very minor reasons, steel of different dimensions and sections. And working with our engineers, we were able to design these column clusters that can work with a number of different sections. So it's very different than designing in the ordinary way where you specify something and then it is ordered and it is delivered. This is really an idea about working with what's already there. So it's very exciting. So the reuse thing, it comes up in different scales throughout the work that I'm showing tonight, and it's part of the research that I'm doing at the GSD. That particular project was very forward in synthesizing, and I think this was around the same time, 2004, synthesizing the environmental factors as well as these materials to produce a low carbon emitting and low carbon embodied carbon building at that time. And so it's been a kind of touchstone ever since. So at the GSD, I've been really focusing on projects with studios where we're taking existing buildings, like yet another scale, and trying to work through different ways of reusing these concrete buildings, especially focused on brutalist buildings, how they can be reinvented, how they can be reused, from the anonymous ones like this one, which is down in Woods Hole, which was one of the studios, to the more heroic examples in America and also in Europe. The last spring, we did a project on this, the Daumier project in Paris, which was a former social housing, and students did things like adding on to it with wood structures, or as well reimagining the uses that could inhabit and kind of editing out parts of the building to make it last longer, to keep that embodied carbon within the building without you know, especially a concrete building it would be a big waste to tear down. And anyway, this is the research that is going on that type of building. And then I kind of framed up the rest of our studio work in terms of, you know, starting with what's there. And it, you know, oftentimes the architecture that we praise and admire, we never see that there might be conditions that were already there, or we tend to, as a group, focus on the new part, the new thing. But there's usually something that you can work with that's at the beginning of the project. And I think that's a really interesting thing that here's a group that we're working with Theaster Gates on a whole section of the South Side of Chicago that is a kind of urban example of reuse and reactivation. Research is really quite important to the work, of course, and that carries through to the production of books. That's Alyssa right there in the book run of one of our research books that was really kind of a book about activating and informing the public in Chicago about its history of its waterways. So this book was called Reverse Effect, and it was really meant to, it was like a project that we did together with a couple of not-for-profits, including the Natural Resource Defense Council and the Joyce Foundation, to help make visible a political issue that's happening at the time about whether to or whether not to disinfect sewage water that was going into our river waterway. So in 2010, it was still the case that partially treated sewage water, CSO, combined sewage overflow, was being dumped into the Chicago River. And this view shows the south branch of the Chicago River with this incredible vacancy of where industry had once dominated the edges. So very interesting in Chicago. A lot of people don't even know where the river is because there's no access to the river's edge because of all this industry, even though they oftentimes pass over it on their way to work, maybe 2 or 3 times in one day. What actually happened is that the Chicago River was reversed, and what it means is these red lines on the diagram were canals that were built to take the flow, instead of going into the lake, which is the city's drinking water, to pull it away from the lake to save the drinking water, and which was a massive infrastructural project. Hard to imagine getting something like that done today. But it was great for the city of Chicago, but it wasn't so great, let's say, for everyone else who was downstream where this polluted water was heading. And so, but then over time, you know, the results of this are very negative on the environment, like flooded basements and bad water quality, and as well as invasive species having an opportunity to get into the Great Lakes. But the opportunity of the vacated industry was a great one. So in our book that I was showing you, we made these recommendations of how to step by step, of course, with the advice of science and experts, but visualize step by step what we might do to unreverse the river or to put it back into its original form and protect the drinking water, but also reduce energy use on infrastructure. But the number one step that we recommended was for the city to acquire this riverside property, and also to give people access to this water's edge, which they didn't have before. And so after doing this project, which was just a book project, a new political administration came in the mayor decided to really focus on the river. And this book had an impact. It really helped shift the idea of what is the river in Chicago to something more that would give people access to it. Even if the river had bad water quality, the idea is to create stewards out of the public that then care about it and take that fight forward. And then, so we ended up ourselves, and also a couple other architects also built boathouses for Chicago youth and communities to be access points to the Chicago River. So it's really about this, in terms of reuse, it's thinking about the city's use as an industrial mecca and transforming it into something that is more about public access. And many of these sites are quite polluted that we must remediate and then build upon. But what amazing results in that now there are so many crews that are youth-oriented and different groups that are able to get on the water, and a whole cadre of people that are devoted to protecting it. To make the architecture, though, I mean, it's one thing to create a building on the lakefront, but to really get people excited about coming there, I think that's where architecture's role is really important. How do we make it exciting? How do we make people want to go out of their way to go to that building? And here we really were thinking of the motion of rowing and the motion, how to capture motion into the building. So we looked a lot at these Muybridge stopgap photographies and looked at the motion of the oars to kind of extract that into a roof form that would be dynamic and varied, just like the oars motion, but also do something environmentally positive, like create clerestories that help warm the boathouse and without using fossil fuels. So that's how that looks, using the M and the kind of V-shaped oar positions. We created this almost like a warping roof and a field house. I think it was required to be masonry, but we were able to convince the city to use slate, which is, masonry kind of. And then really simple materials like plywood that's bendable. So again, it's this coming together of the materiality that exhibits its properties, the qualities of bendability. And even in this one, you can see we had a very low cost plywood, and we ended up just with our team, like gold leafing these little knot holes that are in the plywood just to give it some, something special spark, because that knot hole is actually where the branch was coming out of the tree, so it's kind of like in a special moment. They do a lot of classes here, like these are disabled veterans that are learning to row, but it really is an incredible program to build community and resilience and teamwork for the youth in the city. There's a great film that just came out. I'm going to forget the name right now. I think I'll tell you at the end, but that talks about some ex-gang members who got into rowing, and some of the shots are filmed in the boathouses, but it's a great film just telling the story of what it did for them. So really everyone can row in this boathouse, which is amazing. There's two now, one on the south side and one on the north side. They're slightly different, but they're kind of in the same family. So it's kind of reusing the city infrastructure, and then reusing materials. The reason why I want to show you this Arcus Center for Social Justice Leadership is mainly because of the construction technique of using cordwood masonry. So it's not exactly reuse in terms of something that was already used, because these are trees, but it's not processing the trees. And we all are interested in CLT, wood construction right now, which is a highly processed, very engineered wood. This is way low tech, using the tree, just drying it out for a year and letting it be a sequestration for the carbon. So this is just a small building in the Kalamazoo campus in Michigan, Kalamazoo, Michigan. And it's a center for kids to learn how to connect and be social justice leaders. And so the campus is very traditional in terms of its architecture, but this is a very untraditional and very radical new program that they wanted to express the desires of the program, but make a place that would be easy for people to meet and to connect, especially about difficult issues like social justice. It could be LGBTQ issues, it could be human rights issues, and needed a place, a safe place that allows people to let down their guard and talk straight forward to each other. There was really no precedent for this, so that we really looked at the community meeting houses and vernacular architecture, from Quaker meeting houses to Bali meeting houses. Just what did they have in common? This is really about facing other people in a space. The elements, water, fire, light are common. And those are the things that we tried to pick up on to create a kind of central space around a fireplace, which is, was not exactly easy to do in an academic building, but also food preparation was important to them. And those are all things that help people to come together. So it's really an academic building, but really for special projects, for faculty, for seminars like this room here, and lectures and conferences is one of the big things that they do. And so we worked with this party to connect the different parts of the campus, this grove, and then the residential neighborhood nearby, realizing that, to reduce carbon and to produce a very insulated building, we need a lot of wall. And so we focused the window openings on these 3 points, and really focused in on a renewable material, which is the white cedar in the range in Michigan. And I think it was one of the trips up to Michigan where we stumbled upon this barn, which had this curious wall, and it was made out of wood, and wood in a stacked but on end. So this project really became like a quest to figure out how to do a wall like that in the 21st century. And we found a couple of people, like this couple that were very into building like this. They had only built saunas and small projects. So we brought them to do a workshop with us. That's us and our contractors who are professional masons. And it really was a very easy wall to do. But the thing about the use of the material is that, like I said before, it's very little manipulation of this material. So therefore, it's very low carbon, and trees are carbon. In fact, they are carbon. They take it out of the air and they produce wood. So this is a way to sequester that carbon from the atmosphere. So I think very big potential here, and producing aesthetically a beautiful wall that was not exactly easy to make look this refined, because it's a very brutal kind of like rough technique. But I was so happy with the way that it comes out, and it really weathers and differently on the different exposures. And it's a long-lasting, beautiful technique to do. Each log is almost like someone's face, with their rings and their wrinkles. I felt like it really connected with the mission, and also was relevant in terms of environment. Here's the one wall that is northern wall getting the most exposure, and one of the windows that we did an experiment with the eyebrow window there. This project wasn't finished when we did the book, so I just wanted to highlight because it's so interesting. It's a reuse of an old coal burning power plant here on the shores of the Rock River. And what's interesting here is you have the up in the background, that's a very old college called Beloit College in southern Wisconsin. And this is the power plant that served the town, the industrial town, and heated the college for years and years. And this power plant like grew over the years, and it kept adding on and building capacity. And here you can see it in the with its smokestacks, and this is 1930s addition to it. And what we were asked by during the Obama administration, there was a time when a lot of these were decommissioning because they couldn't meet the environmental rules. So in a way, there's probably a lot of these buildings out here. So I thought of it as a kind of a model for what could be done with something with such a scale that is uncommon to be able to build something at this scale for a college. So Beloit College bought this building with, collaborated with the power company as they were decommissioning, and were able to purchase it. But then had to figure out what to put in there. This is what it looked like when we, the first time, I guess, that I toured it, which was about, I want to say it was about 10 below zero temperature. It was colder inside the building than outside the building. These are the scrubbers that were added in the 1970s to improve the air coming out of the top of the smokestack. But it's just a huge building. We really researched the construction of it. And it turned out it was built a little bit at a time, many different additions. And so to meet the program of the college, we kept in the logic of that and added a field house, which is one of the functions that they needed, kind of in the same extension line as what the original building was doing, and then connected it with this pedestrian bridge because the college is up on the hill and it's a very busy road down below. And so what was really interesting about their idea is like, maybe we could fit as a college. Most of the time colleges go through this thing where they have to build a new student center, and then they have to build a health center, and then they have to build a recreation center. But if we could get all three of them into one building, it might be, able to happen all at once and be more affordable. So that's what we did. We put all three programs into this building, and you can see we kind of united those with with the running track. So this is a student recreation center and health center and a student union or student center. And this big space here is where a lot of the teams practice inside, like baseball and field hockey and lacrosse. There's also student available recreation, weightlifting, exercise classes in this running track, a pool for the swim team, and then a lot of the other functions going on the ground floor, and the kind of event spaces up at the top. And here's the bridge connecting over to the campus. And so it was really an interesting project in that you had this conflict between like going for the best environmental solution and the historic building preservation. So there was always this battle between those two, and I could go on about that for a long time, but I won't. But we are using the river water for heat exchange and really, utilizing the building overall. But we did go for the historic building credits to make this project happen. It looks something like this on the inside. This is the turbine hall. These are coal hoppers that where all the coal is coming down. I mean, it was in pretty bad shape in some parts. So a lot of things to discover in a building like this. This is the final building, which just opened in the fall of 2020. So it was able to be used this last fall, and it came in really handy in terms of the pandemic, because it's the one building the college had where people could really spread out. And there's something about the scale of it that, you know, you just would not be able to repeat today. But this is the building from the Rock River view, and in its final condition. And I just have a couple other shots. I haven't really been able to, you know, organize these. I just recently got the photography, but it's interesting. The part, which is the field house, has so much fresh air exchange. It's really considered an outdoor space that's protected. So they're able to fully utilize that during the pandemic. Here's the bridge going across to connect. And really the building is acting like this, almost a piece of infrastructure that connects people from the river, the river walk on the opposite side through elevators, that it's a machine that allows accessibility in the town. This is going across the bridge and inside the turbine hall and the running track held by the structure above. And these are some of the things that were kept. One of the things we did for this project was tour the building with the students way back when it was just raw, and all the students kind of tagged the big objects that they wanted to keep. So that was really a fun way to integrate the student input. And then here's the pool. We did create these big windows to connect into it so that people can see throughout. Okay, so moving ahead to reusing infrastructure like the powerhouse. This is a new building, but it's built along the High Line in New York. And I just want to show how the High Line itself influenced the design of the building. This we call solar carve, because it's really designed with the sun angles in mind. You might be familiar with Hugh Ferris's zoning studies and the zoning code that was put in place in New York about the step back skyscraper. And here, you know, that is to protect light and air getting to the street. But here we found that along the High Line, there's actually an interior block public space. It's not the streets that in this particular site, what you want to protect is this brand new public, very popular park. And so we argued with zoning to allow us to set back off the High Line, preserving light and views, and go higher against the 10th Avenue Street, which is very, you know, busy street, and it's right on the river. And so by doing that, you can see this comparison that we did with our engineers, that by setting it back the way that we did compared to the as of right, we would have killed the High Line in this area, the dark blue, but instead with this process of carving for sun, we were able to preserve that daylight. These are some of the study models, how to treat the carved areas. And then, you know, figuring out how to produce that in an economical way, like a unitized system. You can see here. But it really does work. And when you're walking along the High Line, you do still get the views and the building. It's kind of being a good neighbor, getting out of the way in a certain way, but even using those constraints, it produced something really interesting and I think very beautiful. That is, it's polite. It's a polite building. This is what it looks like from inside in the conference room areas. And we have a very tall ceiling. So these are, you know, part of the strategy for the building, and also using a very low reflectivity glass. So it's actually a dark building that it reduces bird strikes, very important to me, and also reduces energy use. Okay, so now I just have a couple more buildings, and I'm going to speed up. We're working on the American Museum of Natural History, which started out in this singular building right next to the park, but grew into this campus with many different additions over time. This is Central Park West right here, and this is the Teddy Roosevelt addition memorial under construction in the 1930s. This is what it looks like today, and it's it started out with a clear diagram, like 4 courts, and they immediately started filling into those over the years. And so our area was located right here to make a new wing for science and education. And so here it's about editing away from the existing building to create these multiple connections that will make sense of all the circulation in this place. And to, so that was a lot of study of the building before doing this. And I think it will really clarify the circulation, but the feel of the building, we wanted to express a kind of excitement and sense of discovery, because their science education in the United States is very bad. I think we're like 16th in the world or something like that. And it's important to get people excited about truth and science and facts. And so this project is really to encourage people to feel like they want to explore. So it's really inspired by landscapes that do that, and really studying landscape and how it is shaped. It's very interesting how flow, water, wind, and time can create this interesting flow. I mean, we know we have architecture that has done this in the past, like made you feel the sense of awe and exploration, but we wanted to try to do that toward science. So here you see all the different connections that were made between the existing and the new. There's also this kind of sense that the collection is alive. I mean, it's really being reused. They use this MRI machine to scan their collection. So it's still a place where science is going on, and trying to tap into that excitement as well. So one of the parts of this building is really showing the science that's currently going on in their massive collections. This is kind of an X-ray view through the walls. So again, like I just like making models, and so do the people I work with. And we thought it was so cold, we might as well use a block of ice to try to model, because a lot of the software was just looking very blobby and not exactly the qualities that you find in a natural landscape of erosion. And so we used this block of ice and melted it out here with a blowtorch. Something I did when I was a kid was use hot water, heating it up on the stove, my mom, and then, like coming out and pouring it into the snow and creating spaces. So those are just fun things that I don't want to let go of, even though we have all the fancy tools. These are some of the models. And then we use this to produce our 3-dimensional spaces. And we did have to write we got a consultant to help us write our own program so we could get these shapes. But what's interesting here is this is the structure. It's not an applied cladding. It's a concrete structure that is made with shotcrete onto a rebar frame. So this is really supporting the floors in the building. Here's some of the other views looking up into the atrium space. And I'm really excited that this is under construction, but it's really using a lot of what was there. Again, I think that's why we kind of won the competition for this, was not putting a brand new, building connected by a little link. It was like integrating it into this existing fabric. Finally, just to show you a more of an urban scale project, this master plan that we're working on for the Memphis Riverfront, which is a very complex project along the Mississippi River, a river that rises and falls about 50 feet. It changes in that much elevation, but it's a very wide, big river. And Memphis was a city, actually like Chicago was in the very beginning, it put its back against the river because that was kind of the loading dock. And this was the front street. So the city really wants to turn around and embrace the river. So our plan is all about connecting this diverse set of green spaces along the Mississippi River and connecting them back into the city as well. When we were working on this project, we discovered this really weird stretch of cobblestones called the Cobblestone Landing in Orange. And it was right around this time, like a lot of people didn't know about this place. It's kind of derelict. It doesn't have any trees or shade. And we were interviewing residents that had very different opinions about this place. And right around that same time was, this is what it looked like. Right around the same time, and we start looking at the history of it, we found that it has a very many different things happened on this landing, but it was like the loading dock. And so it was everything from, boats docking there to the cotton trade, which means that it is implicated in the working of enslaved persons working on this dock. Not that they were never traded on this site, but people did work on this place. And so they maybe had a negative opinion of this place. And then it's a history that's passed down orally. It was also a parking lot as well. It was everything. And so at this time, this very impressive woman, Tammy Sawyer here in the middle, was starting a movement to take down these Confederate statues. So these are all events, political, intertwined with the planning events. So we were looking up, like, how can we move forward with these urban spaces that have all of these baggage and have past that, make people feel different ways. So our very important engagement process with people continued. And we're just asking ourselves the question of how can communities remake public space with complex history? So, we're not going to throw this space away, but what can we do to reimagine it? So we started this story project with trying to interview current residents and just listening to the stories and recording them. So that's us filming and drawing sketches and that's Tammy telling a story of just ordinary Memphians and also community leaders, and started this story project that we met amazing people through this process, like Elmore Nickelberry here, who's in his 80s and he still works in the city of Memphis and he loves the city, but he also marched with Dr. Martin Luther King at the I Am a Man March. And that was really pivotal for him. And he explained his experience. So what we were trying to do is get all these experiences, different people, and try to translate them into the cobblestones, like infuse them into the cobblestones. And so here you can see different techniques that we're using. Memphis gave us some of these cobblestones to work with, and we started to put these impressions into them. This is one that had layers. This artist this is a project that we ended up showing in the Venice Biennale, and brought the cobblestones all the way to Venice to give them almost like a voyage and to create a new history. So a certain sampling of them got put on a ship and sent over and installed by Italian Masons in a new home for the duration of the biennial. And there we also told the stories of the Memphians and their impressions of the city. So just, that's it really. This is our headquarters in Chicago. It's also a reused building, 1937, the Polish National Alliance. And it was a kind of a bank, I guess, if you will, or a credit union that we've transformed, and working on right now on an experiment with the roof. We installed this green roof, but it's not just a green roof garden. It is really a biodiverse garden. And we've been tracking this. This is another one of these projects that doesn't, I guess the client is us, but we're tracking the biodiversity of our plant species here. And it's also a place for us to come together. So it's really about connecting people to each other and to the environment. Every year we're doing this BioBlitz. So we have a number of BioBlitz. We take 24 hours and collect all the different species you can, plants and insects, and count the bats and animals. We have also bees up there to help make it pollinated. And we have 3 different species of bats that we've found. So we've become, this is a microphone here that where we work with researchers to study the bats that are, so it's becoming this incredible wild area. And so now our next step is really starting to look at air quality up there. And it's to measure, you know, what the effect is of a green roof such as this, not a typical green roof, on air quality. And so it's really a fun experience and experiment with scientists. And we're also using it to help our neighbors install green roofs. So this is the goal of it, is really to expand it into this green roof network, and to show what the benefits are over time. So thank you very much.